If you've been keeping an eye on the markets, you've probably noticed one metal in particular that's been on an absolute tear: silver. Today, we're going to unpack the incredible story behind its recent price explosion. Let's get right into it. Just to give you an idea of how wild things have been, get this. In 2025 alone, silver prices shot up a staggering 160%. I mean, that is not just a rally, that's a full-blown financial firestorm. So what on earth is going on here? So here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to look at silver's recent wild ride, then we'll dive into the demand story, followed by the supply squeeze. We'll see what the experts are predicting, and finally, we'll boil it all down to your key takeaway. All right, first up, let's talk about the market's recent behavior. And trust me, this has not been a smooth, steady climb. It's been a pure roller coaster, with these incredible record highs followed by some really gut-wrenching drops. You know, what's really fascinating here is just the speed of these moves. So picture this. In December 2025, the price hits this unbelievable record, over $83 an ounce. Then, right after that huge gain for the year, it crashes. But wait, it doesn't end there. By early January, on a major U.S. exchange, it hits another lifetime high, only for prices to crash hard on India's big exchange the very same day as people took their profits. It's just a classic picture of a market being whipped around by some really extreme emotions. And that really brings us to the core question, right? What are the actual forces at play that are causing these huge, violent price swings? Well, it turns out it's a story with two very different but very powerful sides. So let's jump into the demand side of the equation, because this is where silver gets really interesting. It's kind of caught in what you could call a dual identity crisis. It's being pulled in two completely different directions at the same time. On one hand, silver is a super important industrial metal. I mean, its physical properties make it absolutely vital for the technologies that are literally building our future. But on the other hand, it's that classic precious metal, right? A safe haven asset that people run to when the economy looks shaky. Kind of like its more famous cousin, gold. And we're not talking about just any old industrial demand. We are talking about the absolute bedrock of the green energy revolution and the tech boom. Silver is essential for solar panels, for EV batteries, for 5G networks, and even for the servers that power AI. All of these things need actual, physical silver to work. This creates a relentless and growing hunger from industry. And you can see here how all these forces stack up. You've got that massive slice for industrial demand, which is pretty steady and just keeps growing. But then, look at this huge chunk for investment demand. That's from things like ETFs, bars, and coins. That part can just explode based on what the market is feeling. Throw in the traditional uses, like jewelry, and you have all these powerful buyers fighting over the same shiny metal. And if you want to see just how powerful that investor demand can get, check this out. In a single month in just one country, the money pouring into silver ETFs was absolutely enormous. This is a telltale sign of what analysts call trend-chasing investors, jumping on the bandwagon, creating this fear of missing out, or FOMO, that just pushes prices even higher. Okay, so demand is firing on all cylinders. That leads to a pretty obvious question. Why don't we just, dig more of it out of the ground? Well, it turns out the supply side of the silver story has a really unique and critical problem. So here is the most crucial thing to understand about silver supply. It's what's called inelastic. That's just a fancy way of saying it can't easily ramp up when prices go up. About 70% of all silver isn't mined on purpose. It's a byproduct. It's pulled out of the earth when miners are really going after other things like copper, lead, or zinc. So even if silver prices go to the moon, mining companies can't just flip a switch and make more. They're tied to the demand for completely different metals. Now, on top of that fundamental problem, we've had this perfect storm of other issues. For 5 years in a row, demand has been higher than supply, creating a long-term deficit. Then, in late 2025, the U.S. government officially put silver on its critical minerals list. That immediately made people worry about tariffs, and companies started stockpiling it. And if that wasn't enough, China brought in new export restrictions on silver, squeezing the global market even tighter. And what's the result of all that? The estimated global silver deficit in 2025 was a massive 230 million ounces. To put that in perspective, that's roughly a quarter of the entire world's annual demand. It's a huge gap that's really propping up this whole price surge. So with this crazy backdrop of super high demand and a really tight supply, the big question is, where do prices go from here? Let's take a look at what some of the experts are thinking. Just look at this revision from a huge global bank like HSBC. They didn't just nudge their price forecast up for 2026, they dramatically increased it, from around $44 to over $68 an ounce. That is a massive upgrade, and it's a signal that they think this tight market is going to be with us for a while. And some analysts are even more bullish. Panmudi R from Enrich Money points right back to that structural problem we were just talking about, and he's suggesting prices could even target the $90 to $100 range in 2026. But, and this is really important, we have to get a balanced view. Other experts, like Akshay Kamboj, are pumping the brakes a little. They're basically saying, hey, after a run-up this sharp, you have to expect some wild swings. They're warning that simple things like investors taking profits at the end of the year could easily trigger a pretty big price drop. So, given this high-stakes environment, what's the general thinking? Well, for people who are looking to get involved, many analysts seem to suggest that systematic or staggered investing might be a way to handle the extreme ups and downs, instead of trying to perfectly time these massive market swings. Okay, we have covered a ton of ground here. Let's pull it all together and really focus on the biggest points you should walk away with from this explainer. All right, here's the bottom line. First, remember silver's two personalities. It's a vital industrial metal for our future, and it's a classic safe haven investment. Second, the supply is structurally broken. It's mostly a byproduct, so it just can't ramp up quickly when demand spikes, which creates this ongoing deficit. And third, when you smash those two powerful forces together, you get extreme volatility. That means there's a clear potential for big gains, but there is also a very, very real risk of sharp, sudden drops. And all of this leaves us with one last really fascinating question to think about. As it's caught between the growing demands of technology and the deep anxieties of an uncertain world, is silver actually on its way to becoming the single most critical metal of the 21st century? That's the big idea to chew on. Thanks for tuning in.